The strange job offer Jalen was not a man who trusted others. He worked alone. Always had. His job was to solve crimes that no one else could. In the past, he had tracked down murderers across frozen moons, exposed corrupt generals on distant planets, and once even caught a killer who could turn invisible. But this case was different. He stood in the middle of a clean room on Station Theta 9. There was no blood, no signs of struggle, just a body lying flat, eyes wide open, mouth frozen in a silent scream. No wounds, no poison, not even a broken bone. The camera showed the victim walking into the room and never coming out. Then dead, just like that. "What killed you?" Jalen whispered to the empty air. He had run every test, every scanner. Nothing. The answer didn't exist. But something else did. An idea. Jalen remembered a rumor he once heard from an old trader about a species who didn't see or hear things like others. They smelled truth, lies, fear, and even death. So Jalen sent a request to a quiet planet called Virix. 3 days later, the shuttle arrived. When the door opened, she stepped out, small, slim, wearing a dark cloak. She moved with silent steps. Her skin was soft gray and her eyes were large and violet. 2 long ears curved back like delicate leaves, but it was her nose that stood out the most. Sharp, long, and always moving. She took a breath, then another. Her name was Sci-Fi. She walked up to Jalen, tilted her head and said, "You smell of doubt." Jalen didn't smile. "And you smell anything useful?" Sally turned her face toward the crime room. "I will." They entered the sealed chamber together. The body was still there. Untouched, Sally took one long breath. Then another. Her face grew dark. Her hands began to shake. "This scent," she whispered. Jalen leaned closer. "What do you smell?" Sally didn't answer right away. She bent, down near the body and sniffed around the air, the floor, the walls. She stood. "This scent should not exist," she said in a quiet, shaken voice. "Explain," Jalen said firmly. Sally's eyes met his. "It is not from this century, not from this peace. It is from the old war, from the forgotten labs, from something that was banned by every known race." Jalen's chest grew tight. "What is it?" Sally looked around the room once more. "A whisper of death," she said. "Not natural, not poison, not gas. It changes the body, tricks the brain, kills without touch." Jalen didn't like where this was going. "Can you trace it?" he asked. Sally nodded. "Yes, the trail is faint, but not gone." She moved toward a corner wall and pressed her face near the ventilation grid. "Here. It passed through here." Jalen removed the cover and found a hidden panel. Inside, he found a small metal case. Cold. Sealed. He opened it. It was empty, but the inside was coated with a strange shimmer. Sally sniffed once and her face turned pale. "This was it," she said. "The source." Jalen noticed a small button on the side. He pressed it. A recorded voice spoke. "If you're hearing this, it's too late." The voice was calm. Male. Then silence. Sally stared at the box. "This was not used recently," she said. "It was released days ago. The scent spread, touched many places." "Then we're already in danger," Jalen said. Sally nodded. "This scent is wrong," she said again. "It doesn't belong. It calls to fear, to death, and something else." Jalen asked. "What else?" Sally looked up at him. "Something that watches," she said. "Something that remembers. Something not dead." Jalen stood silent for a moment. This job was supposed to be a quick one. Find the killer, get paid, move on. But now, this wasn't just a crime. It was a message. A weapon. And they were already part of it. As they left the room, Jalen turned to Sci-Fi. "How do we stop something that doesn't leave a trace?" Sci-Fi answered in a whisper. "We follow the scent. until it follows us back. The forbidden scent. The sun never rose on Station Theta 9. Artificial lights blinked overhead, but the station always felt cold. Jalen walked beside Saley through the lower levels of the station, a place forgotten by most. Here, the scent trail had led them. Saley moved slowly, her long fingers brushing against the walls, her nose twitching slightly with each step. Her face was calm, but her eyes were different now. Sharp, alert, afraid. "This scent," she said softly. "I have only smelled it once before." Jalen stopped. "When?" "As a child," she replied. "On Virix, in the wind. We lived near an old battlefield, quiet now, covered in green. But one day, the wind shifted. I smelled something in the dirt. My mother pulled me inside and burned our clothes. She told me to never speak of it." She looked up at him. "I smell the same thing here." They found a hidden door behind a trash disposal unit. The scent was strongest there. Jalen used his access chip to override the lock. The door hissed open. Behind it was a narrow hallway. Dim lights flickered. At the end, a sealed glass room waited. "What is this place?" Jalen asked. Saley didn't answer. She stepped forward, eyes locked on the floor. The scent had soaked into the walls. She moved like a ghost. They entered the glass room. Inside was a control table, old and covered in dust. Jalen wiped it clean and saw a logo, half erased, from a company that was banned 100 years ago, Genacor. "I thought they were shut down," Jalen said. "They were," Saley whispered, "but not erased." A drawer clicked open under Jalen's hand. Inside was a metal vial, round, dark, with a small symbol etched on it, a falling sun. Saley backed away immediately. "Don't touch it," she said sharply. "Why?" "Because this is not a normal weapon." Jalen examined it. The vial was empty, but there was residue. Saley leaned in carefully and took the smallest breath. Her knees gave out. She dropped to the floor. Jalen caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin had turned pale, her breathing sharp and shallow. "Saley." He shook her gently. Her eyes opened, wide and terrified. "They didn't just release the old formula," she gasped. "They changed it, improved it. Now it can infect even a memory." Jalen didn't understand. "What does that mean?" She clutched his arm. "This scent carries emotion. It forces the brain to relive fear, panic, shame, even guilt. And if it's too strong, the brain shuts down, the victim's own fear kills them." Jalen looked at the empty vial in his hand. "Someone used this, and they left it for us to find." Saley nodded weakly. "They want us to know it's real. They're not hiding it anymore." Jalen placed the vial back in the drawer and sealed. Saley sat on the floor, breathing slowly, trying to recover. He looked around the room. The walls were covered in notes, old data chips, broken test tubes. This wasn't just a hiding place, it was a lab. "This is where it was made," he said. "Or at least, improved." Saley's voice was soft. "This place is dangerous. Even empty, it breathes the weapon." Jalen helped her up. They had to get out before the scent weakened her more. But just as they stepped into the hallway, a door slammed shut behind them. Lights flickered red. Alarms stayed silent. But a new sound filled the air, a soft hum, low and steady. Saley froze. "That sound," she said, "is not from this building." A voice spoke from the hallway speakers. "You've entered the memory of war." Jalen pulled his sidearm, aiming it down the corridor. The voice continued, calm and slow. "Thank you for confirming her ability. Now we know the scent can still break them." Saley turned to Jalen, eyes wide with fear. "They were testing me," she whispered. "This whole thing, it was a trap." And Jalen realized, too late, they were no longer hunters. They were the prey. A trail of silence, the silence after the message ended, felt louder than any scream. Jalen gripped his weapon tightly as the hallway lights buzzed and flickered above them. Saley stood beside him, trembling, not from fear, but from something deeper, something old, something buried. This wasn't a lab. she said in a hollow voice. It was a testing ground. Jalen scanned their surroundings. Every corner of the hallway now felt wrong, as if the very air had teeth. The scent trail Sci-Fi had followed was still there, richer, thicker, but something about it had changed. We're not alone, she whispered. The hallway curved and Jalen led the way, slow and steady. The lights dimmed behind them as they moved. The hum they had heard earlier faded. Now, there was only the soft sound of dripping water and breathing. Not theirs. Someone else was breathing just ahead. They stepped into a wide chamber. Broken. Crates, shattered canisters, and shattered screens lay scattered across the floor, and there in the center was another body. Male. Alien. Young, his eyes were wide, just like the first victim. No wounds, no struggle. Just terror frozen in his face. Sally bent down and sniffed once. Then she gasped and covered her nose. The scent is stronger, she said, voice muffled. They're using fear as fuel. Fuel? Jalen echoed. She nodded. The more someone fears, the more it activates the compound. It spreads through scent and emotion, even memory. Jalen took a step back. You're saying the weapon is alive? Not alive, she corrected, but reactive, like a hungry shadow. It searches for pain, and then it grows. Before they could speak more, the chamber door slammed shut. Thick mist hissed from the vents. Not smoke, something else. Clear, invisible. Sally fell to her knees. They're trying to break me, she whispered, shaking. The scent is designed to trigger my past, my shame, my nightmares. Jalen ran to her and wrapped his arms around her, trying to block the mist, but it was already too late. Her eyes glazed over, and she started to speak, words that didn't match her voice. Father, please. Not again. I didn't open the seal. Jalen shook her gently. Sally, come back, it's not real. None of it's real. But she was trapped. He closed his eyes. He had seen this before. Soldiers with trauma, haunted by old wars. This weapon didn't need to touch them. It just needed to remind them. Jalen looked around the chamber and saw a red panel flashing behind a control box. He pulled his knife and smashed it open. Inside was a purge valve. Emergency detox. He didn't think. He pulled it. Loud fans roared to life. The mist vanished, sucked away into vents. Fresh air flooded in. Sally collapsed, gasping for air, trembling. Her skin was damp with fear. Sweat and her eyes shimmered with tears. They know who I am, she said. They know what I fear. They've recorded it, smelled it, stored it. Jalen helped her to her feet. Then we turned the scent against them. He guided her out of the chamber. This was no longer a mystery. This was war. They reached the surface level of the station. Here, the scent trail split into two. One path led to the alien sector of the station, a crowded maze-like district filled with traders, smugglers, and refugees. The other led into the corporate halls, where the rich humans lived and worked. In glass towers. Sally paused. They're spreading the scent in both directions, she said, testing how different species react, watching what fear looks like in different minds. Who's behind it? Jalen asked. Sally hesitated. I don't know, she said. But they're not alone. This weapon, it's being used by more than one mind. It smells like a team, a machine, a strategy. Jalen made a decision. We go to the alien sector first. If people are being tested there, we warn them. They moved through narrow streets dimly lit with pulsing lights and vendor signs in 20 languages. Sally kept her face down, her hood raised. She was Virixi, and Virixi were rare here. Suddenly, she stopped. It's here, she said. The scent is here. They turned the corner and found themselves standing in front of a clinic full of children, alien children. Sally's voice broke. They're testing on the young first. It spreads faster, through fear of the unknown. And Jalen realized something dark. They're not just testing the weapon, he said slowly. They're learning how to control it. He looked at the children behind the clinic windows and knew If they didn't act fast, the next room of bodies would be smaller. Much smaller. The first betrayal. The clinic smelled like worry. Not the sharp kind that came with blood or pain. No, this was deeper, like quiet panic that had been building for days. Jalen stood in the doorway, his eyes scanning the alien families sitting inside. Children clung to their mothers. Fathers whispered to doctors. Some looked normal. Others didn't. Sally stepped inside, breathing slowly, carefully. Her hands trembled again. "This place is soaked in it," she whispered. Fear, confusion, but not just from the people. Jalen's voice was low. Then from what? She looked at the floor, then up at the ceiling vents. The scent. It's coming from inside the clinic. He moved fast, flashing his badge at the receptionist, then pushing open a backroom door. Medical tables, scanning units, walls of supplies, nothing looked wrong, until Sally pointed at the air purifier. "That's not standard," she said. Jalen stepped closer. The purifier had a brand logo he didn't recognize. It was humming, quiet and steady. He pulled it from the wall. Inside the filter, mesh was a tiny sealed vial, nearly invisible to the eye. But Sally smelled it instantly. "That's it?" she said. "They've hidden the scent inside safety." Jalen's jaw clenched. Someone had planted the emotional weapon inside a device meant to clean air. "They're feeding fear through kindness," he said. "And no one even knows." A loud voice interrupted them. "Step away from that device." Jalen turned fast, his weapon half raised, only to freeze. A man in a dark suit stood in the doorway. His name was Lycor. He was Jalen's contact for this case. The man who had hired him. The one who had sent the first file about the dead body. The one who said, "I just want the truth." And now he was holding a stun gun aimed straight at Jalen. Sally took one step back. "He smells like metal and deception," she whispered. Lycor's voice was calm. Too calm. "I didn't want it to go this far, Jalen. You were supposed to find something, not everything." Jalen stared at him. "You planted the scent in the clinic?" "I approved the purifier," Lycor said. "Someone else placed the vial. I didn't ask questions I didn't want answers to." "You used me," Jalen growled. "I used your skills, your instinct, your stubbornness. I didn't expect you to bring her." He nodded at Sally. "She complicates things." Sally stepped forward, her voice colder than before. "The scent trail leads to you," she said. "Not just your hands, but your decisions." Lycor sighed. "You don't understand the bigger picture. This is research, not war." Jalen clenched his fists. "Tell that to the dead kid on sub-level 3. Sacrifices are always made," Lycor said softly. Jalen made his choice in that moment. He raised his weapon and fired. The stun bolt hit Lycor in the shoulder, and he dropped like a stone. Sally ran to him and pulled a data chip from his jacket. "Pocket." "What's that?" Jalen asked. "His scent," she said, placing it in her scanner. "We can trace where he's been, and who he's been meeting." They dragged Lycor into the storage room and locked the door. Jalen looked around the clinic again. The children were still there, still breathing the air. He ripped the purifier from the wall, smashing it open and burning the filter core with his plasma torch. "We clean this place," he said. "Then we find where he got that vial." Sally nodded, but her face was pale. "This isn't just one traitor," she said. "There's more, many more. He's not the source. He's a shadow." Jalen took the chip, slid it into his wrist reader, and watched as dozens of locations blinked to life on his screen. One stood out, a place under the spaceport. A forgotten tunnel, locked since the war ended. Sally looked at it and whispered, "That's where it was born." Jalen narrowed his eyes. "Then that's where we end it." But behind the locked door of the storage room, Lycor smiled weakly through the pane and whispered into a hidden mic on his collar. "They're going to the nest. Prepare the next scent." Escape and warning. The clinic's lights flickered once, then went dark. A deep hum rolled through the walls. Not the sound of failing power, but a shift. Something activated. Jalen's wrist screen blinked red. Security lockdown, he muttered. Someone just shut the whole sector. Sally's nose twitched sharply. Her eyes went wide. They've triggered a scent flare. It's coming fast. Flare? Jalen asked, already moving to the door. A burst of concentrated scent, she replied, voice tight. It spreads like smoke, but it doesn't just affect your nose. It touches memories and pulls fear straight out. Jalen threw open the hallway door and saw the mist curling along the floor. It was nearly invisible, but his skin tingled. We're out of time. They rushed down the back hall, pushing through emergency exits, sirens silent, lights dead. Jalen scanned them. Map from Liker's data chip, one path and a cargo chute, led to the old tunnels under the station. They slipped into a maintenance shaft, sealing the hatch behind them, just as the mist touched the door. Sally gasped and gripped the wall. I still smell it, she said. Even through metal. It's learning. Adapting. They slid down narrow ladders, ducked under half-flooded pipes, and finally reached the old freight tunnel. The smell was weaker here, colder, like memories that had gone dusty. We're clear. For now, Jalen said. But that lockdown won't stay quiet. Whoever's behind this, they know where we're going. Sally sat down for a moment, breathing hard. You don't understand what they're doing, Jalen, she said. This isn't just a weapon. It's a test of species, of minds. They want to know who can survive fear, and who can't. He looked at her, frowning. Why? Sally met his eyes. Because whoever passes, lives. Jalen didn't like the way she said that. They followed the signal to a blast door buried in the station's underbelly. Rusted. Sealed for years. The access panel was broken, so Jalen used a plasma cutter. The door hissed, then creaked open. Inside was darkness. But as soon as they stepped in, the walls lit up, not with lights, but with memory. Thin mist clung to every surface. Shapes moved inside it, echoes of fear. Holographic recordings made from scent. On the walls they saw it. A mother clutching her child, screaming in silence. A soldier frozen mid-run, mouth open in a last breath. A Virixi boy sitting, alone, rocking back and forth. Sally pressed her hand to the wall. They've built a library of panic, she said. Each fear recorded, copied, refined. They know exactly how to break any mind now. Jalen felt the pressure in his head rise. His breathing quickened. Old memories stirred. The war, the fire, the broken face of a friend he'd failed to save. Sally grabbed his arm. Don't let it in, she said. It's trying to taste you. He focused on her voice. Steady. Calm. Real. Together, they reached the core room. And there it was. A chamber filled with scent amplifiers. Thousands of vials lined the walls, each one sealed tight. In the center, a console. Sally walked forward slowly. This is where it started, she said. They harvested the first fears here, stored them, learned from them. Jalen checked the console. Logs showed recent activity. Someone had accessed it just 2 days ago. A name appeared on screen. Project Dawncry. They're still active, he said. They never stopped. Sally touched one of the vials. These can't be left here, she whispered. If even one of them leaks in the right place. Before she could finish, the console beeped. A new line of text appeared. Thank you for confirming exposure levels. Phase 2 begins now. The door slammed shut behind them. Red gas hissed from vents. But it wasn't the same scent. This one was colder, clearer, and Jalen felt nothing. They're trying a new mix, Sally said. One that erases fear instead of triggering it. If it works, people won't resist, Jalen finished. They'll just accept whatever happens. She nodded. They're not testing death anymore. They're testing control. Jalen made a choice in that moment. He pulled out a signal beacon from his pack, an illegal one, military grade. If he activated it, the whole sector would go into lockdown, including the humans in power, including innocents. This might get us arrested, he warned. Sci-Fi took a deep breath. Then we get arrested. But the scent must not leave this place. Jalen pressed the button. Alarms exploded across the city. Lights blared, doors slammed, and the station entered full quarantine. From behind the glass wall, someone watched. A pale woman with silver eyes and a breathing mask. She turned away from the screen and whispered, "They've chosen the hard path. Good. Now let's see if they survive phase 2. The truth buried in scent. The station was silent. Outside the locked chamber, sirens wailed. But inside, only the soft hiss of the gas could be heard. Sci-Fi pressed her back against the wall, eyes shut, breathing through a strip of cloth soaked in neutralizing gel. Jalen stood beside her, pulse racing, gripping his weapon, though he knew it would be useless here. This wasn't a fight of bullets. This was memory, fear, control. The gas creeping through the vents was different now. Sci-Fi had said it was designed, not to trigger fear, but to erase resistance. Jalen could feel it working. His heartbeat slowed, his anger dulled, even his urgency began to fade. "Don't breathe too deep," Sci-Fi whispered. "It numbs the soul." Jalen blinked. "How? Do you know?" She didn't answer at first. Instead, she pulled a small device from her belt. It looked like a broken compass, but when she pressed it to the wall, a blue light blinked. She traced a circle. Within seconds, a small panel hissed open, an emergency vent shaft. "This way," she said, and crawled in. Jalen followed. The shaft was tight, barely enough for his shoulders. They crawled in silence, the only sound the metal creaking beneath them. "You knew this was here," he said finally. "How?" Sci-Fi's voice was flat. "Because I've been here before." Jalen stopped crawling. "What?" She didn't turn to look. "When I was a child," she said slowly. "Before my people left Virix, we were part of a program. They called it emotional resilience training. It sounded noble. It was a lie." She crawled forward again. "They brought us into labs like this, tested our reactions to pain, fear, confusion. But what they really wanted was scent data. Our kind smells more than anyone. They needed our biology to create something powerful." Jalen was speechless. "And you?" "I was the youngest," she said. "I escaped when the labs were shut down. My mother faked our deaths. We vanished. But the scent of this place, it never left me." They dropped down into a new corridor, colder, darker. This level hadn't seen light in decades. "You never told anyone?" Jalen asked quietly. "What would it change?" she said. "No one listens to survivors, they only listen to the data." He looked at her. Even in this dim corridor, she looked smaller than usual. Fragile. But her eyes were sharp. "I smell it now," she whispered. "The memory compound. It's awake again." They reached the main control vault. The doors had no handles, just a curved panel meant for biological input. Sci-Fi stepped forward, placed her hand on it. Nothing. Then she bent closer and breathed on it. The scent of her own fear, her own memory that had triggered the lock. The door opened. Inside was a large round room, humming with energy. The walls were alive with streams of scent-coded data. It wasn't written in words, but in patterns of smell, invisible to humans. "This is where it all lives," she said. "Every fear they collected, every response, every version of the weapon." Jalen stared in silence. "Why store it?" he asked. "Because they're perfecting it," she said. "Every species reacts differently. Some freeze, some run, some fight. They want to control everyone." Jalen stepped toward the center of the room. A pod sat there, sealed in glass. Inside it floated a pale figure. Female. Tall. Virixi. Jalen frowned. "Is that my sister?" Sci-Fi said. His eyes widened. "She didn't escape," Sci-Fi whispered. "She was the strongest. They kept her, used her scent, kept her brain alive, because she could feel fear without dying. They fed her the emotions of others and recorded the reactions." Jalen stepped back. He felt sick. They turned her into a core processor. Saley nodded. Her mind became the pattern library. Every scent weapon created since came from her. Jalen clenched his fists. We shut this down. Now. He moved toward the console, but it was already blinking. A voice echoed through the chamber. Calm, mechanical female, unauthorized presence detected. Phase 3 will now begin, the pod hissed. Gas poured in. The Virixie girl inside twitched violently. Saley screamed. No, she's still in there. Jalen turned. How do we shut it off? Saley ran to the console and opened a panel. Inside was a dual switch, one that required 2 hands, 2 prints. One was already filled, the other waited. You trust me? She asked. Jalen didn't hesitate. He placed his hand on the panel. Do it. They turned the switches together. The lights dimmed. The pod hissed again, this time releasing pressure. The figure inside stopped moving. Gently, slowly, her eyes opened. Not in pain. Not screaming. Just quiet. And she whispered something in Virixie. Saley wept. She said, she remembers me. The scent that could never fade. The silence inside the chamber felt holy. For a long moment, neither Jalen nor Saley moved. The scent weapon systems around them had gone still. The humming walls quiet for the first time since they entered. In the pod, Saley's sister floated gently, her pale skin beginning to flush with warmth. Not just alive, awakening. Saley reached through the opening and held her sister's hand. She remembers the wind, she whispered. Our home. The trees. The soft scent of rain. Jalen stood back, his hand still resting on the console switch, watching the sisters in silence. But peace never lasted long in places built from fear. A tremor shook the floor. Lights above sparked. Then the ceiling spoke in a calm, dead voice. Containment breach. Core shutdown compromised. Purge protocol engaged. Saley's eyes widened. They're trying to destroy the evidence. Everything. Even her. The chamber lights turned red. Vents opened again, not with scent gas this time, but with white sterilizing fog meant to dissolve organic matter. Jalen didn't think. He moved to the pod and slammed the emergency override button. With a loud hiss, the glass walls slid open. Saley reached in and pulled her sister out, struggling under the weight. She was weak, barely able to stand, but her eyes, deep violet, like Saley's, were awake. This way, Jalen shouted, leading them toward the emergency exit tunnel. As they ran, the fog chased behind them, eating the floor, the walls, the memory files, everything. They crawled into the vent shaft they'd used before. Jalen sealed the door behind them, but the heat from the purge made the metal glow. We won't outrun it, Jalen muttered. Saley's sister suddenly turned to her and spoke. Her voice was soft, shaking. There's another way out. Behind the decay tank. It was built for me, in case they ever lost control. Jalen looked at Saley. Will it work? Saley nodded. She wouldn't lie. Not anymore. They ran. The tank was old, rusted, covered in layers of chemical ash. Behind it, a narrow tunnel with a broken warning sign. Inside, the tunnel dipped downward, slanting deep into the station's forgotten underbelly. They emerged in the old waste sector, a forgotten district abandoned after the last war. Air was foul. But it was air. They had made it. Jalen slumped to the ground, chest heaving. Saley helped her sister sit down, covering her with a soft cloak. She needs rest, Saley said. The years have crushed her. Jalen turned on his wrist communicator. The emergency signal he'd sent earlier had finally triggered a response. Several pings flashed on his screen. Messages from news channels, medical ships, even the Galactic Ethics Board. They all wanted the same thing. Answers. But none of them were ready for the truth. We have the data, Jalen said, holding up the drive he'd yanked from the console before the purge. Enough to prove everything. The fear programs, the weaponized memories, the human officials who funded it, the labs that hid behind peace treaties. Saley looked down at the drive. Will they believe it? Jalen met her eyes. They'll have no choice. The next day, under armed escort, Jalen and Saley stood before the Council of Systems. Jalen wore a worn coat and a calm expression. Beside him, Saley stood straight, her sister seated quietly behind a protective screen. Jalen played the recordings. He showed them the scent maps, the emotional attacks, the profiles of species reactions, and the words carved into the heart of the project: control through fear. Council members stared in silence. Some shook their heads. Others looked down in shame. How many knew? One asked. Enough, Jalen said. But none of them expected a Virixie girl to remember a forgotten smell. Saley stepped forward. Her voice was clear and strong. You spent years trying to build fear into a weapon. You forgot that those who feel fear learn how to face it. The chamber was still. Then the ruling speaker stood. This program will be destroyed. Those involved will be named and tried. And your people, he looked at Saley and her sister, will be honored as witnesses to a truth we tried to bury. Weeks passed. The lab was dismantled. The remaining vials were burned. The data made public, but scent always lingers. One day, as Jalen stood on the roof of his safe house, Saley joined him. You never asked what I smell when I stand near you, she said. Jalen looked at her, curious. Should I? She nodded. You smell like stubbornness, like old fire and broken machines. But underneath, you smell like someone who still regrets not saving someone. Jalen looked away. Maybe I do, Saley smiled. But you also smell like someone who did the right thing when it counted. Her sister called from below. The tea was ready. They turned to go back inside, and Saley whispered, the scent of war will fade, but the scent of hope, that stays longer than anything.